10 o'clock, so we're going to go ahead and get started. So good to see you all. This room is full of people that I know and recognize and people that I'm just meeting, and this is just a really great opportunity. And for those of you that are joining us online, welcome. I hope you also have a blessed experience today, getting to know the other folks that are in your breakout rooms. We have such a treat awaiting you all today. I'm Carolyn Helsel. I teach preaching here at Austin Seminary. I'm also project director of the Faithful Preaching Project, and this is our second of 8 preaching workshops that we'll be offering over the course of our Lilly grant-funded 5 years of doing this Faithful Preaching Project. Today, we have the great gift of getting to hear from the Reverend Dr. Lisa Cressman, who for 30 years served as an Episcopal priest, a spiritual director, and somewhere along the line, around 2014, she woke up in the middle of the night with a vision of backstory preaching. What if we helped preachers, not just in the short term, but in the long term, to help them see preaching as a spiritual practice? They work on, through the backstory preaching, process, craft, and spirituality. So the process, what is it like to work on a sermon over time? How do you do this as a spiritual practice? The craft of preaching, really improving your preaching, and the spirituality of this. How does this connect with your own faith and your own growth as a preacher and as a Christian, as a believer? So today we're going to get to benefit from her excellent leadership. She won't be standing up here, but I'm short, so I thought I would stand up here to do this brief introduction. For those of you that are here in the room, bathrooms are down this hall, and to the left, we have water and coffee and tea in the back, and some little muffins if you need some nourishment. And then we'll have lunch around 12 o'clock, and on Zoom we'll be breaking during that hour, so make sure you join us back between 1 and 2 for the final session. So without further ado, please join me in welcoming Lisa Cressman. Lisa.
Thank you. Thank you all. It is a real delight to be here. Thank you, Dr. Helsel, for the invitation. Also a big shout out to Kelly DeClean, who has done a fantastic job behind the scenes coordinating all of this and putting us all together. So Kelly, thank you. And welcome to those of you who are on Zoom. I'm also really glad to have you. In fact, I am far more accustomed to working in Zoom land than I am in person. So this is really fun for me because I hardly ever get to be with actual human beings who I can hold your hands. So I am loving this. So thank you. So we're going to start off with making sure that you can use the QR codes today. So you're going to use your phone. And how do you feel today? Yeah, come on up. So have your phone ready to use the QR code, which I'm going to pull up next. All right, so point your phone. And those of you on Zoom, I understand, can do the same thing. So how are you feeling today? What is your internal weather? Stormy, overcast, partly cloudy, clear and sunny. How are you feeling? What are you bringing into the room? Partly cloudy, clear and sunny. Kind of feeling so-so today. It's all right. Energy can be low. So probably kind of an average feeling day. Ordinary. All right, we're going to move on to the next one. And so this one, most preachers have a sermon that they're essentially preaching all the time. We have sort of one sermon that is floating through everything we preach and say. And so I'm wondering, what is your one-word sermon? So it might be compassion or justice or love. So what is your one-word sermon? We'll create a word cloud as we go. See, this is so cool because you can even see up there at the top, you can see how many people are typing at the time. This is so cool. Are you able to see the screen okay? Yeah, okay. I don't want to block it. Beloved, mercy, vulnerability, hope, faith. Mine would be compassion. Inclusion, justice, unity, peace, acceptance. Vulnerability. That might be the first time I've seen that one as a one-word sermon. But all in all, that's a pretty nice list, don't you think? Let that go. Some people are typing, so keep that going for a second. Interdependence. Oh, I love these. These are so good. Well, if this is the good news, oh, delight, good. If this is the good news that's going out into the world, this is feeling like, yeah, the world's got a chance, you know? This is pretty good. It does it, yes, sir, yes, it does. Yes, it does. All right, so as we get started also, I want to talk about how we are going to work together today and have some sort of ground rules for intentions, and you have this in your packets as well. So we're on about page 4 or so. So as we get started, this is what I'm suggesting is, this would be about page, I don't know, I don't have the page numbers in front of me. What is that page? Oops. Oh, I wonder if that got, maybe, yeah, oh, it's, okay, it's not there. That's okay. It's all right. So here's what I am suggesting for the day, is that, that we're trying to encourage respect and full participation. So bringing our whole self to each moment, meaning being fully present, being here, trying not to let the things of the day, letting this interrupt you, giving yourself the gift of being just right here and not multitasking, which is what we do most of the time. So a gift of you don't have to multitask today. Extending generous assumptions. We're all doing the best we can with the tools that we've got. We're doing our best. So we give people the benefit of the doubt. Listening spaciously. Meaning listen broadly. There is most of what somebody is saying, we don't know their whole story. There is 99.9% of their story that we are not hearing. So listen spaciously and graciously to what people are offering. Only respond and answer to what you wish. Of course, hold your own boundaries. What is comfortable for you. You are not required to disclose anything that you don't want to. Take what you need and leave the rest. Some of the things that you hear today, I hope will be helpful. Some of it probably won't be. So take what you can use and don't worry about the other stuff. Please silence your phones and reserve your phones for questions so you're not on your phone while we are talking. For those of you who are online, I recommend turning off your notifications, closing your tabs. Again, giving yourself the gift of just being only right here. And I'm going to do my best to start and end on time. So my next question for you is, of those, would you add any intentions beyond what I suggested? What would you add? So you can, if there's something that is missing, please use the QR code and add it so we have sort of a group understanding for today. Reconnect to your calling. Listening to God, have fun. Trust the process, amen to that. We talk about that a lot in backstory preaching. Be still and know, nice. Growth. Be aware that the Holy Spirit will lead you. Grow in courage. Unfurl into fullness. Beautiful. Intimacy with God. Validate each other's experience. Connect with other pastors. I'm hearing you and a man's voice occasionally, so maybe those who are managing Zoom, there might be somebody's mic accidentally on. It's not here in this room. How much of my own story to share and when is the right time to share it? Yes, we're going to be having small group conversations and whole group conversations as the day goes along. Be open to all opportunities. Be still and hear God's words for the week. Follow the golden rule, always a good one. Offer grace. We enter and leave as full human beings. Have you ever heard the made-up word flossom? That one is both flawed and awesome concurrently? I think that's a good one, flossom. We're all flossom. All right, this looks pretty good. So are we okay on how we are going to be with each other through the day? Does this all look okay? Lovely. Okay, now, one more thing about introductions is that I would like for you to introduce yourselves to each other. So for the next 5 minutes, I'm going to have you turn to your table groups, and I would like you, and in Zoom, in your small groups that you will be with for the day. So offer your name, where you preach, and in one sentence, something you really like about where you serve. So your name, where you preach, and something you like about where you serve. So for example, I'm Lisa Cressman. I serve at Backstory Preaching, and something I really like about where I serve is that I get to work with preachers of all denominations all around the world. It's very cool. All right, so your turn. I'm going to give you 5 minutes and introduce yourselves, and then we'll come back to the main room. All right, so hopefully you've gotten to know your table group a little bit, and those of you in Zoom, you've connected with your small groups there. So we'll have a number of times today that you'll get a chance to talk through some of the questions for the day. So the title of the entire workshop is Preaching is Your Life is Preaching. Preaching is your life is preaching. Now, I realize that most of us in this room and those on Zoom have accepted a specific call to be preachers in a more formal sense, where we are offering sermons behind a pulpit or in other contexts. But long before we accepted that call, we were already preaching, because our preaching began with our baptisms. Preaching began with our baptisms, because once we became a follower of Christ, we said, we agreed or were confirmed later to, this is the way I will live my life. This is who I am. So it's not simply a title that gets stamped on top of us. Baptism is something that changed our very DNA. It changed our origin story. And it is not just what I do, it is who I am. So the way we live our lives, the way we comport ourselves, the way we speak, the decisions we make are always in some way reflective of who we are as baptized children of God. Now, a way to think about this is in the parenting world, one thing that I heard, which was very helpful to me, is that parents are always teaching their children something. The only question is, what are they teaching? Because kids are sponges. They're like those, I saw for the first time today, a self-driving car. Those things are wild, with the things on the top and on the, So that's kind of like what kids are. They've always got the radar going on the top. They've got it on all corners of their bodies. They're constantly noticing, absorbing, becoming. They are becoming the environment in which they are a part. Because that's what parents and other adults, but mostly parents, are teaching them. Parents are always teaching their kids something. The only question is, what are they teaching? So in the way they talk to each other, the parents and the other caregiving adults, the decisions they are making, the jobs they have and how much time they spend at them, what they eat together or not, what they watch together or not. Everything is teaching kids something. In that way, we are preaching with our whole lives. We are always preaching. The only question is, what are we preaching? With the way that we live our lives, we are constantly showing people what we believe. And the congruence, the degree of congruence in which our beliefs about God is coming through and being emitted through our beings. Our choices, our decisions, the way we speak, how we talk to telemarketers, the way we behave on very crowded Austin roads. All right. Mm-hmm. Yep. Yeah. That's it. Time to pray. Exactly. Time to pray. So today, what we are going to be focusing on is getting in touch with one way to access what is it that we are preaching. What are we preaching? And so that's where the preacher's backstory, Lectio Divina on Scripture and Life, is the way that we are going to get at this. So, when we read a text to prepare for a sermon, or regardless of your ministry position in church, whether this is Christian ed or you're a youth leader, whatever the thing is, when we read the text to learn about God, we are always concurrently learning about ourselves. Every text is like a Rorschach test, because I am old enough that when I was in seminary, what I was taught about preaching was that the preacher needed to get out of the way of the text so that the text could be its own sort of pure thing by itself. I think that's really bad theology, because it's just impossible. Because the only way Scripture can come into the world is through human beings. This is it. This is the only thing available for the text to move through and out into the world. And it is impossible for any of us to read the text without reading it through the lens of who we are and our experiences. All of that is shaping how we see a text and the way we interpret it. So who we are, all of that background, our educations, our family of origins, our ancestries, the way that we were trained, all of the things, that constitutes our backstory. And like the backstory of a character in a movie, for example, that backstory is driving everything that character does. Everything. But in the movie, it's rare that we discover the backstory. That's partly why many of us love prequel movies, because that's when we get the backstory. Love those. How did they get to be the way they are? That's their backstory. But in general, in most movies, unless it is a specific part of the plot line, we don't know backstories. We infer on the basis of what we see on the screen, right? Okay, so our backstories are coming with us into the pulpit, and they are influencing every single sermon we preach and everything we offer about our lives that reflects our belief about God. When we are aware of our backstories, for example, we might have an anecdote or illustration from our lives that we get to put into a sermon. Yippee skippy, that's really simple and easy. But there are massive parts of our backstories that we're not aware of, that we have blind spots to because it's the ocean we swim in. We don't recognize that part of our backstory, and therefore we're not recognizing the way it's influencing how we see the text. So when we can get in touch and articulate our backstories, bring them out into life, show them to ourselves, then we get to ask, okay, this is my backstory and how I have understood the text, or how I have understood my life. This is my experience. But is it congruent with the way I understand the gospel? Am I living, do I believe such a way that it is congruent with the gospel? When those two things are in conflict with each other, then we've got a lot of questions. How do we preach with integrity and authenticity when our backstory is in conflict with the gospel as it is? Not as we wish it were. Not as we wish it were, but as it is actually presented. So today, that's what we are going to be focusing on. We're going to apply, Lectio Divina, a portion of it, to reading a text, and then we're going to be examining our backstories, or one way to look at our backstories. So this is how we're going to do it for the day. So the goals and schedule for the day are that we are going to get intentional. We're going to be aware of the influence of our backstories so that we can be intentional about offering our whole selves to God and ask to have God heal what needs to be healed. So until 11:05, we're going to pray Lectio on a text and gain new insights about God so that we can be transformed to become the good news we preach. In part 2, we're going to talk about the preacher will be able to identify aspects of their backstory that influence the interpretation of the text. And then in part 3, we're going to put it all together. And so now that you've got the text and your backstory a little bit more out in front of you, what do you do with it? Okay? And then in between here is when we will have lunch for 45 minutes. Okay? All right, so let's dive in. So part 1, talking about the text. So Lectio Divina. At Backstory Preaching, this was a big part of the way that I implemented the vision that the Holy Spirit landed in my lap about wedding spirituality with preaching. And it is the application of Lectio Divina. If you are not familiar with Lectio, I am not going to talk about all 4 aspects, all 4 stages of Lectio today. There are many, many resources available for you to access. I give just a super brief definition for you in your packets. Today, we are focusing on just Lectio. So a given is that there is more to this story to be applying to your sermon prep. If this ends up interesting you, then Backstory Preaching, we've got lots of resources to help you dive deeper into this process. But today, we are only talking about Lectio. And Lectio means to read. And there's a particular way that we are going to be reading the text. So we are reading it slowly, carefully, and naively, as if we've never seen it before, bringing to it a beginner's mind. So when we're reading Lectio, we're trying to read it literally. What does it actually say? Not what I remember it says, not what I've heard other people talk about, not what I've preached on it before, not what I believe about it. What does it actually say? What's the black and white on the page? Now, for those of you who get nervous like I would about literalism, when we are reading in a Lectio style, at this stage, we're really just reading it naively, like we've never seen it. We are not trying to make meaning yet. Later in stages of Lectio Divina, meditatio, the next study stage, that's when we start to make meaning of. But one of the odd things about preaching is when we choose, or we figure out, or we are assigned our sermon text, nearly always, our first question is not, what does the text say? It's, what am I going to say? Right? We start with anxiety because there's something on the line and we've got a deadline and we don't want to say something stupid or foolish or, God forbid, we have nothing to say. By the time it's time to get up there, it's like, oh my gosh. Okay, so that is not helpful. That coming to the text with anxiety to try to get yourself out of a jam, because this is about our egos, what does it say about me? This is not helpful to anybody. So this is actually the hardest part for preachers, is to slow down enough that we are not thinking about what am I going to say. We are focused on what is God saying, period. Okay, so that is what we are going to be doing in Lectio today. So in the next pages of your packet, we have a section of John that we're going to come to, but first, you have lots and lots and lots of pages in your packet. That we are not going to get to all of those pages today. My goal is for you to learn a process that you will be able to apply to the rest of those pages that you've got in the packet. We're using just one example of all the things you've got in the packet. And the process is Lectio on the text, Lectio on your backstory, and then what do I do with it? Okay, so stage one is Lectio on the text. That's what we're doing right now. So when we do Lectio on the text, we're going to be using this that you have in your packets. We're going to be using this God diagram. So there are 3 translations of the text. We're going to be reading all 3 versions. And each time, we're going to use one of these prompts. The first time through, you're going to be paying attention to what is God doing, or any member of the Trinity. In this case, it's talking about Jesus. So what is Jesus doing? What are the actions? Or in this case, also, you can broaden it a little bit. What is Jesus telling other people to do? What is Jesus directing people to do? So we're really paying attention to the verbs. What is the plot? What is happening? 1, 2, and 3. What is happening? The actions. What is God, Jesus, Holy Spirit doing? The second time we read, it's going to be, what is God's affect? What do you infer that God is feeling? What are God's emotions? What is happening behind the scenes that might have been driving the actions? Because our emotions are what drive our behaviors. So what is God's affect? What are the feelings and the emotions that we infer from the text? And then finally, what does God hope for? What does Jesus want? What are the motives that are leading Jesus to drive this action? What is God hoping for all of us? What is the outcome? There's always a reason that this stuff is in the text. There's always a reason Jesus is saying what Jesus is saying, because Jesus wants something. What does Jesus want? And in this case, what does Jesus want for us? Okay, so those are the three prompts. So we're going to read the text the 3 times. I'm going to ask for the prompt. And on your worksheets, or there are also a couple of pages of blank pages for notes at the very end of your packets. You can use those as well. Jot down notes as we go. And then we're going to go through all 3, and then you're going to turn to your table groups and share what you wish. Okay? So I'm going to read the first time, and then I am going to ask for volunteers to read the other 2. So be prepared that I will be asking for volunteers. Okay, I'm going to read the NRSV UE on the left. As I read it this first time through, pay attention. What is Jesus doing? And jot down notes as you go. John 15, 1 through 8. I am the true vine, and my Father is the vine grower. He removes every branch in me that bears no fruit. Every branch that bears fruit, he prunes to make it bear more fruit. You have already been cleansed by the word that I have spoken to you. Abide in me, as I abide in you. Just as the branch cannot bear fruit by itself unless it abides in the vine, neither can you unless you abide in me. I am the vine, you are the branches. Those who abide in me and I in them bear much fruit, because apart from me, you can do nothing. Whoever does not abide in me is thrown away like a branch and withers. Such branches are gathered, thrown into the fire, and burned. If you abide in me, and my words abide in you, ask for whatever you wish, and it will be done for you. My Father is glorified by this, that you bear much fruit and become my disciples. Take a minute, 2, and jot down, what is God doing? Take a few notes for yourself. What is God doing? Take one more minute. What is God doing? All right, just finish up your word or sentence you've got going, and then we're going to come back and read a second time. Would somebody be willing to read, please, the NIV in the middle? There are a few microphones at tables, and I will need to use a microphone anytime somebody's speaking to the whole room. Great, thank you. So this time, as the NIV is being read, pay attention to what is God, Jesus, feeling? What are the emotions? What is his affect?
I am the true vine, and my Father is the gardener. He cuts off every branch in me that bears no fruit, while every branch that does bear fruit, he prunes, so that it will be even more fruitful. You are already clean because of the word I have spoken to you. Remain in me, as I also remain in you. No branch can bear fruit by itself. It must remain in the vine. Neither can you bear fruit unless you remain in me. I am the vine. You are the branches. If you remain in me and I in you, you will bear much fruit. Apart from me, you can do nothing. If you do not remain in me, you are like a branch that is thrown away and withers. Such branches are picked up, thrown into the fire, and burned. If you remain in me and my words remain in you, ask whatever you wish, and it will be done for you. This is to my Father's glory, that you bear much fruit, showing yourselves to be my disciples.
Thank you. All right, what is Jesus' affect? Take a few minutes to jot some words down. Take one more minute on this one. Somebody finish your sentence or your thought before you forget it, and we'll read the third time. Okay, so this time, read the Message. And let me say a word about why I use the Message version. I use it all the time. And that is because the Message version works. Eugene Peterson, it works sometimes and it doesn't at others. But the reason I like it is because it makes you think. Why do I respond to this text the way I do, either favorably or not? So it makes us question, what is my theology? What do I believe? Because I'm reacting to it, there's a reason. So that's why I love using the Message. Plus, sometimes the language is just really beautifully written out. But it's because we react to it that I love to use it. So as it's being read this time, pay attention to, what does God hope for? What does God want? What are the dreams? What does God hope for? Okay, go ahead.
I am the real vine, and my Father is the farmer. He cuts off every branch of me that doesn't bear grapes, and every branch that is grape-bearing, he prunes back so it will bear even more. You are already pruned by the message I have spoken. Live in me. Make your home in me, just as I do in you. In the same way that a branch can't bear grapes by itself, but only by being joined to the vine, you can't bear fruit unless you are joined with me. I am the vine, you are the branches. When you're joined with me and I with you, the relation intimate and organic, the harvest is sure to be abundant. Separated, you can't produce a thing. Anyone who separates from me is dead wood, gathered up and thrown on the bonfire.
So what is Jesus's affect? And I don't mean just specifically in the Message version, the story as a whole, taking into account all three versions. No, it's 1 through 8. Thank you, so sorry. I was looking at the end of that paragraph and thought, we're done. Thank you, please keep going.
But if you make yourselves at home with me and my words are at home in you, you can be sure that whatever you ask will be listened to and acted upon. This is how my Father shows who he is, when you produce grapes, when you mature as my disciples.
Thank you. All right, what does Jesus hope for? Like hoping for the entire scripture to be read, you know? So, all right, what does Jesus hope for? Take just another minute on this, and then we're going to turn to small groups. I'm going to ask you to turn to your tables and in Zoom in your small groups and share what you're comfortable sharing from each circle of the diagram. You don't have to cover all three, just whichever one you found most compelling. What insights for you arose, what surprised you, what challenged you, what is making you curious, what do you have questions about? So insights, surprises, challenges, curiosities, and we will go until for 5 minutes, so 56 past the hour. 56 past, for those on Zoom who are having to manage exact moments, 56 past the hour. So here in the main group, I'm going to invite you to share aloud as you feel comfortable. Zoom participants, you can offer into the main chat. But I'd love to hear from you what you're comfortable sharing from the circles in the diagram, either what you wrote if you didn't have a chance to share it, what your table was talking about, or small groups on Zoom. So what did you hear? What insights came to you? What have you not noticed before? What surprised you, in other words? You've read this text 100,000 times. What have you never seen before? What have you never considered before? What surprised, challenged, or made you curious? And I will, of course, be asking, we need to pass the mics. We've got 3 available. And so we have to share. I think I've heard that's a good thing. So we'll need to share the mic. So please offer.
I'll jump in.
All right, thank you.
One of the things that I saw and brought up is that I always saw this text as about the kingdom of God, but I realized in this reading, perhaps for the first time, how much it's personal.
Oh.
And it's about our relationship.
Oh, how personal it
God.
is.
Yeah.
Yeah, about our relationship with God.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, thank you. So, did you hear the comment?
We didn't hear the prompt.
Oh, so, yeah, oh, sorry, yes. So, as you're comfortable sharing from the diagram, what insights arose, what surprised, challenged, or made you curious? So, what have you never noticed before? What have you never considered before? What came up? It's okay to say what sort of feelings might have come up in you. We're going to get more into that in the next part. So, what did you notice? What did you see?
One of the things that I noticed was the fact that my relationship with God brings him honor.
Oh, your relationship with God brings God honor.
Yeah.
It goes over to God. Uh-huh.
Correct.
We were struck by the conditional love, like H.E. brought out that it does seem conditioned on your behaviors and your choices. And so some of us also saw God as a tender person, the person who tends us in the garden. So it's an interesting juxtaposition of those both in the same text. So I think that's what we were circling around a little bit.
I wonder if it might have been intentional that I chose this text. I wonder.
We were chewing a little bit on this middle circle. What is God's affect? At least I brought up the question or the idea that I'm not used to thinking about God's feelings when I exegete a text.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Feelings drive behaviors. Emotions drive choices. Yes, so when we are exegeting a text, we are also exegeting God. What is God's backstory? How did God get to this moment, this decision? What was driving God to get here? Of course, most of the time, or maybe all the time, we don't know. We will never know for sure. But that's part of the fun of being a preacher, is that we get to infer. We make really sound, educated guesses. It's not just coming from anywhere. This is where doing exegesis and being responsible about a text is super important. But once we've done that work, we get to imagine. We get to use our sacred imaginations. I wonder, what might God have been feeling? What came right before this moment for Jesus? That this is what, of the billion things that Jesus might have chosen to say, this is the one. in the limited time Jesus had with these people, this is the thing that was the most important thing for him to say. Why? Why this thing, this moment? What drove it? What was behind it?
Well, it's chapter 15, so this is the last discourse that Jesus has with his disciples. And I thought I heard a sense of not fear, but concern that there would be people who would not hear his message and who would then turn away and lose, maybe through their own choice, lose the opportunity to know the joy of abiding in God.
So can I infer also from what you're saying, urgency?
I'm sorry. Yes,
Urgency? Is that would be a way to
yes,
say what you're
yes,
saying?
Yes.
Yeah. Great.
Question, which is, do you distinguish between God and Jesus Christ in your work,
Oh, you mean for these questions?
depending on where you are in the Bible or?
Yeah, it's sort of, they're always all there, but I tend to go with who's the dominant character, which
Okay.
one is showing up in this moment. Yeah, but you could go to all three.
I wanted to submit, when I looked at the message translation, ultimately what I kind of gleaned is the fact that God not only wants us to just be bearers of fruit, but he wants us to be bearers of great and grand fruit, in that he wants us to have abundance, in that if we're connected to him and have a relationship with him, and ultimately it goes from not just a relationship but an intimate relationship, and as a result of all of that, it's kind of like the psalmist when he talks about the overflow. And I always use the illustration of when our grandparents used to drink coffee pre Starbucks. They used to, get the tea kettle and then prepare it, and then they had the china. Sometimes it was good, sometimes it was beat up, but nevertheless they didn't drink it out of a styrofoam cup. And so once you poured the coffee into the cup, before you pour it into the cup, you put the cup on a saucer, so that when you poured the coffee, in case there was overflow or in case you didn't want your hand to be burnt, you'd keep it on the saucer. And additionally, when you had the overflow, if you really seen all-day coffee drinkers, they even go so far as to take the overflow, what's the excess, and they say, well, bottoms up. And so, but I point out the fact that in life, the Lord blesses us with abundance so that we might bless others.
Wonderful. It's great. Thank you. Thank you.
Can you repeat that phrase that you said about the difference between emotions and feelings? You said emotions drive something and feelings.
Emotions drive behavior. Yep. Emotions drive choices. Yep. Emotions drive choices. All right. We are about at break time. So during the break, we're going to take about 10 minutes. So stretch, get coffee, get what you need. Slurp from saucers as they are available. Use the QR code and type out the question at the bottom of that page. In the text, I see that God, fill in the blank. And it is intentionally vague. It is, what do you see about God? How would you summarize from this story, I see that God what? And we will return for the next part at quarter after. At quarter after the hour, we will return. All right, we are moving on to page 12 in your packets. We're up to page 12. And you've got lots of fun stuff in between to do another day. Actually, I'm going to explain a little bit about what's there. So you have multiple ways that you can approach Lectio on the text. And they are really fun, creative ways to pray Lectio on the text. Now, for those of you who use the RCL lectionary, every Monday on the Backstory Preaching Facebook page, we pray Lectio on that Sunday's text. And so we do some of what we're doing today. So you are always welcome. And it's really fun because, of course, we're with colleagues from all over the place. You get lots of ideas that you wouldn't have otherwise, new insights that you wouldn't have had otherwise. So Mondays, noon central on the Backstory Preaching Facebook page, you're always welcome. In your packets, you've got some directions for a number of different exercises and ways that you can pray Lectio. And the hope is that you come to it with, again, not anxiety of the what am I going to say, but with the joy of discovery of what am I going to find out about God this time that I've never noticed before? How is it going to have an impact on me in a way that I've never noticed before? That it hasn't, or the last time, again, if you use a lectionary, the last time we came through the lectionary, I was a different person because it was 3 or 4 years ago. And so what is happening this time? So coming to the text with this sense of what's around the next corner that I get to find today. Because that's one of the great things about being a preacher is the privilege. I mean, how many other professions are there where people will pay us to spend time with God? They pay us to do this. They say, oh, would you please go read scripture? Would you please go pray for a while and see what you can come up with a word to bring back to us? I mean, seriously, it is the most awesome profession on the planet because we get to do this. And we get to do it every single week, plus some. And so when we come to this with an attitude, an idea of discovery, of being able to come back to our people to say, come and see what I just discovered. It's so cool, and I want you to know it too. So the pages that you have of Lectio are some fun, creative ways for you to keep doing that. Now, I am not suggesting that you would do all of those exercises every single time. Nobody's got that kind of time, and if you do, I want your job. Instead, it's choosing one, maybe two, to practice on your own. And also move into the ones that might be a little more uncomfortable. Like there's one I was about to offer this as an example for all, and I'm retracting what I was about to say. This is the example for me, is doing a comic strip, because I am a terrible drawer. Even my husband will not choose me for Pictionary. That's how bad I am. Yeah, so, but it is really enlightening to draw what is happening in the text. So stick figures and little speech bubbles work just great. So lots of different ways that you can pray Lectio on the text that will help you slow down to see what is exactly on the page. And the sermon fodder that is there is infinite. That is our greatest resource for preaching. It is not commentaries. It is not what other people have said. It's what is in the text. So when we slow down enough, it emerges of its own accord. It is effortless on our part because the Spirit shows up when we are still and quiet enough to hear it. So fun ways to go about that. Yes, please.
Yeah, I was just going to point out, Dr. Robert Smith suggested you read the text a minimum of 50 times.
There you go. So Dr. Smith says to read the text a minimum of 50 times. Yeah. So these are ways that it will actually help you do, maybe not 50, but a whole bunch. All right, now we're going to move on to page 12. And we're going to slow down because in the first part we had a whole bunch of things to do with introductions and all of that good work. And I meant to ask this first. What reflections came to you during the break? Did anything arise to you? And do you have any questions? Has anything come up yet? Yes, please.
Previous text, I said concern, as I used concern as an adjective to describe Jesus' feelings, and you suggested urgency, and I think that that is appropriate. However, I really like the word concern, and I almost like the word fear, because I just hear fear, and yet to think that God might have fear seems a contradiction.
Isn't that a thought? Yeah. Yeah, that's one of the reasons I love doing this, is because once you start digging in and asking different questions, we get different answers, and then we get to wrestle with them, which is, again, one of the very fun parts about being a preacher. Okay, so now we're going to shift to the text plus your backstory. So now we're going to start putting those two things together. As I said at the beginning, our life experiences are going to be interpreting the text. Our backstory is what allows us to discover the things that we do. Things that are outside of our milieu are not going to occur to us. The only way things can come to us is because some way, shape, form, time, something came through us and it is residing in this vehicle. So giving ourselves the time to discover what's in there. What is it that I have experienced that is moving me to see the text in this way? So we are going to spend some lovely introspective time, and you're going to have a chance to go deep, and I'm going to give you plenty of time to do some personal journaling on this. Now, I realized when I was going through these that I might have slightly change the wording of in the diagram. So in what is God doing? I might have said, what have you experienced? How have you experienced this of God? How have you experienced, or have you experienced what God is doing in this text? And then the second one, likewise, have you experienced the affect that you described when you did Lectio on the text? So going back to the Lectio on the text, have you experienced God's affect in the way that it came to you? Have you experienced that from God? Yeah, from God. We're not talking about human realm yet. Have you experienced that from God? And then, what does God hope for? Have you experienced these hopes? Again, going back to your Lectio on the text, what you've written there, have you experienced those hopes for yourself? Have you experienced those dreams from God for yourself? And it can also be, have you witnessed it? Because none of us has all of the experiences, but we may have seen it, but it needs to be in real life. Have you seen an example of this? Has somebody come to you in pastoral care where they have revealed, I feel like God is what? So it can be what you've witnessed or what you personally have experienced. Yes?
When you say in real life, you mean not in movie form or
Right, not movie,
form,
right.
some real person.
Right, it's incarnational, right. So I mean, in real life, meaning incarnational, not in media or movies or something, but in real life.
Tangible for 350.
Say again?
Tangible for 350.
Tangible for 350. There you go. Okay. Yeah, so have you experienced the feelings that you identified? Have you experienced from God the feelings you identified? in the Lexio on the text. Okay, so are the questions making sense? Yep. Right. Have you experienced or witnessed God doing these things in all three of these? Okay, so I'm going to give you about 10 minutes to go through each of those circles and do some self-reflection, some journaling to answer those questions. What have you experienced of God based on your Lexio of the text? And if new things occur to you when you look back on the Lexio on the text, of course, add them. So we'll go for 10 minutes. All right, finish up your thought. Write your last sentence. All right, then we're going to turn to your table groups. And we have 15 minutes because this can get into some deeper stuff. So I want to make sure you have time enough to tell the stories you want to tell. So we're going to take 15 minutes, and then we'll come back to the big group to hear your reflections. So share what you're comfortable from each circle in the backstory diagram. And again, what insights arose, what surprised, challenged, or made you curious. So this is vulnerable, perhaps tender stuff, maybe some delightful stuff as well. So what came up for you? What did you notice from your backstory for each of these circles? So 15 minutes. All right, so I would love to hear from you. It sounded like conversation was animated. So, which hopefully means that you were telling a lot of good stories and integrating that with God in this text. So tell me, what happened at your table conversations? What insights came up? What surprised you?
We went deep right away, and I think it's because you suggested it.
Good.
Because I think it could have been the same things we've talked about already, but your prompt of this could get deep, and we went directly deep.
All right, great. Great. Because that's where the transformation happens. Yeah. Yeah. Good. What else? What came up at in your conversations? And for those of you on Zoom, put it into the whole group chat for you all. What came up?
Hey, I can share. I think the recurring theme at our table is now we understand why old people tell you the same thing over and over again when you're a child. Because we related to both now being the quote unquote old people lecturing to young people of like, friend, this is not God's call on your life. Like, like come on. And also reflecting on our own childhoods of moments where grandparents or parents might have said, go do this, and then we chose to do this, and we're like, So that's how we related. Those were some surprising things that came up, and I think the last thing is really struggling with like, I don't know, sometimes making some connections to this text and from a tangible, incarnate way. And so like for me, one thing that came up was, what's the thing that God's going, Simone, we talked about this. Like I can name that for, when I've had to do it, but it's like, what's that moment where maybe God is saying like, but we talked about this, friend. And so, yeah.
So, that old saying, when the student is ready, the teacher appears. Well, sometimes when the student is ready, the text appears. Yeah, and then it hits us in a different way. Good. What else?
We spent a lot of time dealing with the aspect of pruning, and in the text, Jesus tells us, I am the vine, and talks about the gardener. We talked about aspects of what that implies, and also talked about the role of a farmer. And sometimes in our mind, the context around farming versus gardening can be somewhat different.
Mm-hmm.
I loved what Karen said about gardening, tending the vine being more of an artistic or artisan way of approaching the message versus the more workman-like aspect of the farmer. But they both apply. And this idea of pruning, I mean, in the text, the dead branches are thrown away, but the pruning is happening so that what's left can thrive.
Mm-hmm.
And seeing that play out in my own life
Mm-hmm.
is a real awakening.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, great.
I would say at our table, we all kind of shared what feels fresh right now.
Mhm.
And this process seemed to bring up kind of a much more personal connection and an intimate connection to who God is to us. I would say in my process, I really kind of struggled to think about how God has felt toward me. Like that circle seemed really beautifully challenging, to kind of imagine what is God feeling about me, especially outside of a judgmental context.
Uh-huh.
Not what is God deciding about me, or what is God thinking of me, or but just what is God feeling about me.
Yeah.
So I really appreciated that process.
Yeah. Yeah, because if we have this vast range of emotions, well, where did that come from? Right? We didn't make it up. We have a God. So if we have these emotions and we believe we're made in the image of God, then God's got to have them too. And I presume that God doesn't particularly favor one emotion over another, but uses all of them. And that includes the really loving, compassionate, gentle ones towards us too. Yeah, of very often saying, oh, you're being way too hard on yourself. Yeah. Yeah. As you can imagine, too, these are great questions to take to spiritual directors and therapists. Just saying.
And that's one of the things that had stood out to me, I think, in the first reading was maybe in the message, instead of saying you are already cleansed, you are already pruned. I've always read this text thinking okay, Jesus is saying, I've been pruned, you go prune. In the message version, it was you've already been pruned. Just stick with it.
Yeah.
Just stick with it. Stay here. Abide.
So what does it mean to you when you hear that? What's the difference?
Yeah. So to me, it feels like that I can't hear enough the message from God that I'm already enough. God has already made me enough in my baptism, And I spend so much time and energy trying to make sure that I'm enough. And it's almost like Jesus is saying, breathe.
Yeah.
Here we are. Just be here. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Abide. Yeah.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So for me, it's kind of, there's some diagnoses for some of the things going on with me, but there's
as for all of us,
let some of those things settle away, shed, and slow. Yeah.
Yeah. Beautiful. Thank you. Thank you. Right, I want to raise one of the things that this brought up for me, and that was my first crisis of faith as a child, because it says, what you ask for, you will get. And I had a goldfish who died. Okay, now, it might be because I hadn't cleaned the bowl in a really long time. I don't know. It might have been oxygen deprivation. But as I could tell my fish was dying, I was very upset. And so I prayed, and my fish died. So some of working with this text is also going back into what was my mind at the time. So when I was 8 years old, what did this text mean to me then? What was the impact it had? What was God's affect at the time? What did God hope for? And if we believe that these things are true, they have to be true all the time. So even in an 8-year-old brain that is not yet capable of abstract thought, what does it mean that God had hope for me at the time that could be realized? What did that mean to an 8-year-old? So taking these questions with us into all of the realms of our life, the stuff we go really deep. And those are the stories that are already affecting what we preach. We just don't realize it. So bringing that stuff forward allows us to say, yes, I'm still there. No, I'm not. And to wrestle, to bring up new questions. All right, I want to offer something you learned from your conversation, and then also opening it for general any questions. Any questions at all? Using my baggage as a catalyst instead of a hindrance. We're all going through something. Amen to that. Yep. At age 5, a group member heard God say, "I am your father." Wow. It's a nice way to start life. Everyone struggles with self-doubt at some point. Yep. I witnessed the power of vulnerability in embodying the text with our stories. Okay, I can go home. My job is done. If that's what's happening, all right, we're done for the day. That's great. We have arrived. Listen with expectation. Do you ever share from the stories that come up? That's a great question. How the pleading, pruning God can be painful and yet does something with that. God's not an angry gardener. Similarities in our differences. Thinking about the same text from different stages of life. Yeah. Insight on pitfalls of sharing backstory in preaching. Yeah, preaching from scars versus wounds. Yeah, great question. Good, we'll come to that. And if I forget questions, please bring them back up, because I've already forgotten the first one. I was able to add joy, sadness, and patience to my understanding. Good. Do we continue to grow after death? Geez, I hope so, because oh my gosh, how boring. I mean, can you imagine sitting on a cloud for all of eternity, strumming the same harp, like, oh, you're great, God, you're great, God, you're great. Oh, change the lyrics now and then. Oh, I hope we grow. This process teaches about the healing power of God's word. Yeah. Reinforced importance of self-awareness as we encounter Scripture. Also awareness of what others bring. We all experience God in different ways, and they come forth when we look at our backstories. Yeah. All right, so there was one question about scars versus wounds. My colleague at Backstory Preaching, the Reverend Dr. Meredith Krigler, just finished her D-Min on this very question. And she is a person who lives with disabilities, and so she wrote her thesis on Holy Saturday preaching. So she is really a great person to look up, and I presume at some point she will write a book out of this. I certainly hope so. So I'll offer my take. There's a difference between preaching from the wounds that are happening on Good Friday to healing and uncertainty being in process on Holy Saturday, or being redeemed, having it come through on the other side by Easter Sunday. And as always, our greatest concern is for our listeners. It's not for ourselves. And so we want to make sure that if we are telling a story, there, of course, I'm sure you've heard this before, we're not going to give them the feeling that they've got to take care of us, because that's not their job. And we don't want to put them in that position. So in many ways, because our wounds are our backstories, we're already preaching from those. So there were questions about how might this be perceived from our listeners, and how do I take care of myself? Because we are not obligated to tell any of our stories. They are personal and private to us, and we have boundaries. So we're not obligated. So there is do no harm to the listener, there is do no harm to the preacher. And there's a level at which sharing is too vulnerable, so that, yeah, it might get the point across of the text, but it is doing damage to us. And I don't believe that that is what God asks of us. So there needs to be some good self-reflection. If you've got questions, please vet it with somebody else who will really tell you, not someone who will give you a pat on the back and say, go for it, but someone who will really say, this is what I'm hearing, here are the risks, here's what you might get out of it. And we'll get to this in the very last part about what do you do with sermons. One of them is, of course, you can fictionalize stories. So it can be your story, but you can turn it into something else, but we'll talk more about that later. Please.
I also, in thinking about what you were saying about, and I thought about sometimes with wounded individuals, case in point, I think about the disciples in John where they had denied. In John chapter 20, where the disciples had tried to hide and run away from all their ill wills and all the proceedings of the past week, and they thought that, they were still going to be hunted down, America's Most Wanted, et cetera, et cetera. And then all of a sudden Jesus appears, and that's a word for all of us, in that regardless of where we're at and what we've done, he still has a way of meeting us. Even when we think we've closed out the world, shut out the world, we can run, but we can't hide when
Love that.
So.
Yeah, we can run, but we can't hide. Yeah, we might try to avoid some things, but Jesus will always find us where we are. Yeah. There was an early question. I said, oh, yeah, Karen, please.
I was just thinking about, I've been at the same place for 18 years, and I was just thinking that the congregation stories have also become my stories, and I need to take that same care and consideration for how I'm using our backstory.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, because this isn't only affecting our personal backstories, but we can do all of these things with exegeting the congregation and asking all of these questions about the people we serve. Yeah, and think of the Bible studies you could do, the stories that you could elicit from your congregation if you would take some of these questions to them and see what they come up with. And especially if they're willing to go deep with each other, you could get some great stuff. Yeah. And for their own learning, I'm not saying to exploit it for the purposes of your sermon, right? Yes, so let's be clear. It's not just for us to gain, oh, there's a great story, next Sunday, it's on. But for their learning, yeah. Yeah, there was a question early on that I lost pretty quickly because that's what my brain will do. It went on to the next thing.
I think, are you thinking about the one that says, do you ever share from the stories that come up? But I think you've just covered that.
Okay, great.
Yeah.
Good.
I'm sitting here just realizing that in what Karen just said about taking into account your church's, your congregation's backstory, as a lay preacher, my first reader for my sermons is my wife.
Mm-hmm.
And I need to be concerned about, because so much of my backstory is also her backstory.
Yep.
So many times, if I'm sharing something about my relationship with her, our marriage and whatever, that's part of that process for me. She's the first reader. She gets to veto the message if necessary.
Yep. Yeah, along those lines, I urge a lot of caution when using stories about our children, because they don't get a vote in that, particularly unless we ask them. But even then, we've got all the power over them. So are they really going to say what they mean? But being really careful about using our own children's stories.
And saying a little more about Holy Saturday.
A little more about Holy Saturday. What I mean by that is, when I think of Good Friday, I think of being in active pain with something that is very fresh, it is very raw, and it is not yet ready for public consumption. But by Saturday, the bleeding is stopped. Jesus is laying in the tomb, has had a few hours of rest, and the scars, I like to imagine, are in formation. So it's not quite as healed up as it will be as we see on Sunday, but it's also not as raw as it is on Friday. So in terms of personal discernment about is it an appropriate time for me to tell my story? It's an analogy to think through, where am I at on that spectrum? To decide, am I respecting the dignity of my human being to share this story now? And another way to think of it, is it really the best and only story? Really is my story the only story that could really illustrate this thing? It can't be. We get too many stories in the world. So generally speaking, I would say if we're not sure, then opt for, I'm gonna look for something else. And then, because the story is your story, you can always use it another time, or you could use it in another way. So did that help?
Yes, and it reminds me of one professor saying, don't stick a story in a sermon just for the sake of sticking a story in a sermon.
Amen.
And that's been helpful.
Amen. Yes. Always be able to know, why is every single thing in my sermon? Why am I putting it there? What's the purpose? What's the point? Okay, we are at lunchtime. Do we have Zoom up and going? Okay. Hello, everybody back from Zoom. In-person people are dragging their way in. I hope lunch was good, but we are going to get started. So we are on part 3. But I would love to hear... Oh, you know what? As for Zoom people, because I forgot to pull this slide up, while in-person people are coming back, you can, if you've got questions for me, then please use the QR code and ask questions, and forgive me that I skipped past that slide before. But you've got a chance to ask questions. 19. Page 19. All right, so we are moving into part 3 with text plus backstory equals the sermons, the Spirit's sermon. So we're putting all of the parts together and thinking about how we might communicate. This QR code is up for the Zoom people because I forgot to give them the chance before, so I'm giving them a chance to ask questions if they have them. The first thing up, so we're on page 19, and box number 1, the Spirit's sermon. When I talk about a sermon, I'm talking very broadly, in and out of the pulpit, any form of communication. Because again, we're always communicating something about God. And so whether you are officially ordained or not, or you are a youth leader or Christian ed director, it doesn't matter. Any form of communication is a way to offer the good news. Okay, so the way all of this comes together as the Spirit's sermon is because the good news has come through you. It has been lived through your experience, and then you and the Spirit are sort of talking it out and figuring out what is it that is going to be helpful of this connection, this story, and the text that is going to be in service of this community. So that's the first question, is how are you and the Spirit going to start talking to each other to put this together? Okay, so the question about replicating handouts, there is a copyright permissions page is the very last page of the packet. So take a look at the copyright permissions, and that should answer that question. But if you've got specifics, let me know. Thank you for asking. Then, authentic, genuine. The reason a sermon can be authentic to us is that it really comes from us. We're not preaching about something that's outside of us. As I said, that I was taught that somehow we're supposed to keep the text pure and away, untainted from by human hands. So we're not talking about God as if God were a subject matter like biology. We are not talking around the subject as if we're sort of dancing around things and we're not getting at the heart of the matter. We're preaching from who we are and what we know. And I love this, that authentic, going back to the etymology of the word, original, genuine principle. So it is something that is authentic, means it is coming originally from us. It is being born from us. And so genuine, natural, not acquired, it's innate. And then I love this alternative etymology is from the Latin genu ni, from a supposed ancient custom of a father acknowledging paternity of a newborn by placing it on their knee. That they're saying, this belongs to me. I am mine, this one is mine, and I am this child's. We are one and together. That I love that is one way we can understand the etymology of genuine. And then we are preaching from our backstory. Authentic messages at the bottom should be recognizable as the offspring between the text and our backstories. There's a way in which I own this sermon and the sermon owns me. That it would not be mistaken as somebody else's story. It is innate to who you are. And it's really extraordinary to think that of all history, the entirety of the universe, there is a very finite amount of time we get your story. It is so brief, and we don't want to be deprived of it because nobody ever again will be able to offer the sermon that you can. And it is because of your backstory. Your unique backstory is what is going to make a unique sermon. And if we don't get your unique sermon, we will never get your unique sermon. And it is a gift to humanity to receive your story, your interpretation of the text. So don't deprive us of that gift. And then finally, creating the Spirit sermon is prayerful discernment. And it's the exercises we've been doing about becoming aware of our backstory, its influence on the way that we understand the text. Then finally, where we're going next is now we get to kind of the hard work of, it's not too difficult if our backstory feels congruent with what we read in the text. It's a whole lot harder when it feels incongruent. All right, so that's what we're doing next. So on page 20, there is congruence. We can feel congruence or incongruence or both. So for example, in the pericope we use today, I feel both congruence and incongruence with this particular text. So with congruence, we often feel a sense of harmony. So again, what are our feelings? What's our affect as we're reading this story? There's often a sense of peacefulness and that all is right with the world. Because in some senses, what we're hearing is, yes, you're right. You do understand it. You're right. And we all want to hear that we're right. So it makes it feel really easy to keep going. We can feel a sense of eagerness because we want to share what we know, because this is super cool. It can often feel a lot more comfortable to preach on that text, and it might be easy to find a whole bunch of stories or anecdotes or whatever illustrations you use, because it's all fitting together. You've got more of a wrapped up with a neat bow feeling, not always, but often. And so then, when we experience congruence, we need to ask ourselves, what do I believe authentically, text plus backstory, that I feel called to offer, and I'm able to do it, and why? So why this aspect of my backstory? What is authentic, and do I genuinely believe that I can offer out to the world? And why would I do it? Because we're not preaching just to get a job done. We're preaching because we have good news to share. So why is this the good news? This time, this place, these people, why this part? Now, I also want to say that sometimes we need to preach a sermon that feels congruent because we're too worn out by other things to tackle the incongruent. And that's okay. Again, do no harm to the preacher. When we need spiritual rest ourselves, it's okay to preach something that feels on the easier side. We can't do the hard stuff all the time. Or we can risk burnout for ourselves. The pushback we get from other people can be more than we can manage. And we may have things happening in our personal lives that are leaving us drained. And so we just don't have the energy. That's okay. So all of that, that's the where are you called to do this story right now? Maybe. But if you're not, that's okay. All right, when there's incongruence with the text, that's when it gets, I forgot to, there we go. So when there's incongruence with the text, then we're often feeling the opposite feelings. It can feel discordant. We might feel anxious. The story doesn't resonate with us, and it might even contradict our beliefs, experience, and theology. It might contradict it. And I don't believe that we as preachers are allowed to say, well, Jesus didn't mean, or God meant. Our job is to wrestle with those incongruities. How do we make sense of my life experience is this, and the text is telling me this? What do I do with that? but I don't get to take an eraser to the text and revise it on the spot. Because our listeners are reading that text, and they may have the same sense of incongruence, and it is a disservice to them to leave them with, but the text says, they don't know what to do with it either. So our, as in preachers wrestling with it, our wrestling with it with our congregations to say, I don't know. And that's, again, why praying Lectio on the text as it is, not as we wish it were. We gotta deal with what it says. So taking it slowly and carefully to make sure we're clear on what it says. When it's incongruent, it might, we might feel stressed out because we don't know what to do with it. It might feel harder to come up with stories, anecdotes, illustrations, because everything is feeling off and awry. And then at the bottom of the pair of that column, what do I believe authentically, text and backstory, that I feel called and able to offer pastorally and with integrity, and why? There is do no harm to the preacher, and there is do no harm to the listener. We may come up with something that we disagree with or is incongruent with our lives, or we just feel like, I really do want to take the scrubby to Jesus' words and rewrite them to this time. But to bring that forward to the congregation and simply say, for example, but Jesus didn't really mean that, is not fair to them. Or likewise, I do know, I do not recommend that if, for example, you have a different experience in your human life and all of history and the virgin birth, that tackling that disparity, Christmas Eve is not the time to do it. That does a disservice to our congregations. Christian ed, absolutely. Private conversations, of course. But Christmas Eve is not the time to be bringing up, I don't think it really happened this way. Okay, happy for you to think that. But at what point are you going to be talking about that, and why? Why would you be talking about it at all? Why am I talking? Wait, why am I talking? And its corollary, waste. Why am I still talking? So why are we saying these things? To what end? Who is being served by it? So that's where, what can I say that is pastoral to me and the congregation that still has integrity? I'm not gonna lie. I'm not gonna gloss over things or say everything is lovely when it isn't. So what can I offer with integrity that I still genuinely believe and feels congruent with my experience? So when it's incongruent, it feels a lot stickier. All right, we're going to move on to page 21, and I'm gonna give you some work to do. There are questions. Okay, so at the top it says, based on your preaching text. In this case, we have the text from John, but this would be, of course, applicable to any sermon text that you are working from. And note, so in this case, we're working from John. What are your points of congruence? What does congruence feel like in your body, physically, emotionally, spiritually? What do you notice? How does the congruence affect your relationship with God? What authentic message might you preach? And then also questions of incongruence. What are the points of incongruence? What does that feel like? How does that affect your relationship with God? And what's an authentic message you might preach? So we won't have time to do all of those questions. I want you to choose the column, or you can go back and forth if you wish. Whatever questions have the most energy for you, whatever questions you find most compelling, I want you to answer on the basis of the John text, and then we're going to turn to small groups. So I'm going to give you 5 minutes. So you've got 5 minutes to do some self-reflection, and then we'll turn to table groups and small groups. All right, let's turn to your tables. And as usual, we're actually going to do 5 minutes in table groups. And then we'll return to the big group for conversation. So based on the text from John, as you're comfortable, share your reflections about congruence or incongruence with the text. 5 minutes. All right, let's come back to the main room. You know the drill. So in Zoom, put your comments in the chat for all. And here in the room, was surprised, challenged, or made you curious? What insights did you have? Whether it was sort of general table group conversation or you personally, it all works. So what did you notice? Yeah, please, Taylor. Thank you.
So much of what I wrote was in between congruence and incongruence.
Yeah.
And I think for me, there's a lot of like, with this text, the invitation to abide and trust that the fruit bearing will happen when you're abiding. I am so on board with that theologically. I love that theology. Spiritually, that feels like that's true. But emotionally, I have so many strong messages embedded in me that like I have to bear fruit to earn abiding, like the reverse. And so I find that's often my hardest place in preaching is when I kind of am at that sort of like, yeah, I think that's true, but I'm not sure what that feels like.
Yeah. And anybody share the feeling of I have to bear fruit in order to be able to abide, to be brought into the group? Perfectionism. It's, yeah. Yeah. Thank you, Taylor. Good. What else, please?
What I was thinking about, the idea that, well, the first incongruence I ran into in this passage is verse 3. You have already been cleansed by the word. How many, well, I would ask for a show of hands, but I'm not in the sanctuary right now. Do we really feel that? Can we really embrace that? And there's a very strong feeling in me. I don't know. I struggle with understanding what that means, that I am already cleansed by the word. So there's a humility that's coming in there that I think I run into with every text I try to preach to.
Yeah. And imagine the invitation of what if you did believe it? What if you did trust it? What would be different in your life if you actually trusted that? There's sermons in that. Yes.
So one of the things that we were talking about that feels like a push-pull is you're already cleansed and I do abide in you, and this wonderful comforting language. And then also, by the way, you might be dead wood and get thrown in the fire. And we were saying like the congregation is going to hear that. And if you don't deal with that, they're going to walk away saying, you left it out. So that tension between what seems to be a mixed message there.
Yeah. And for those of us who have to live with the lectionaries, I'm an Episcopalian, so I am duty bound, right? When both of those show up in the text, and it's like, I only have so much time to preach. I got to pick something here. And so it's a real dilemma because you're not going to preach on all the things. Yeah, so it's really hard. Yeah. Good, thank you.
So just following up on that, you talked to the idea that it may not be the right time for me to preach into the discomfort, but maybe sometimes it's not the right time to preach into it for the community.
That's right.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So
yep.
I'm going to lean somewhere. I may lean on what's congruent and what's more universal.
in Scripture.
Yeah, we absolutely have to exegete our congregation to make our best estimate about how much they can bear. So one of the ways I talk about it is the brittleness of the congregation. How brittle is the congregation? So how much are they able to take before they will break? And so how strong, at what pace, and how often? Because we can't do really hard messages and bring them into discomfort all the time. That's more than most of us can manage. So figuring out how much can the congregation tolerate for their own capacity to wrestle with the word.
I think that's a huge challenge right now in this day and time as well.
Yes, it is. Yes, it is. And it is, well, my experience working with working preachers, because I only work with working preachers, is the amount of emotional bandwidth and capacity to make decisions is drastically diminished.
I was looking at this text and just looking at my congregation in terms of preaching on, fruit and all of that. Well, our congregation, even before I got there, there's been no growth, and actually there's been decline. And so I'm sitting here thinking about, well, yeah, I could really preach on this text, but what would the congregation receive when they hear these words, when they reflect on the scriptures? Would they feel somehow that if you're not experiencing numerical growth, does that mean you're not bearing fruit? So there's a lot of different ways you can go with it.
Absolutely. What does it mean to bear fruit? How do you know that it's happened? What does it look like? Yeah. What else? Time for one more, please, Ted.
I think it is important to consider what their bandwidth is, the congregation's bandwidth at any given week to week. And we certainly don't want to go over the cliff overestimating or self-indulging with what you read from wherever you're reading from, your own life or circumstances. But I think it's really important in the long view not to under-evaluate or underestimate where they are, because we all move along in the journey incrementally and usually in small increments, millimeters. And so to not lose sight of that fact, we may have a tendency to be underestimating ourselves and then thus projecting that on the congregation. And I think it's important to keep that balance.
That's a great point. Which is another reason why it is so important that we are preachers in community with each other. I think it is one of the bizarre disservices to the church, and especially to us, that somehow we got the message that we are a church by definition, a community, a body of Christ, unless you're a preacher. And then you go off to your own study and you do your own work, and we feel like it's cheating if we talk to anybody else. I mean, that is incongruent with what we understand to be the body of Christ. It is the only place I know of where it is encouraged for people to go off by themselves to do all of their own work. It's the only one in all of the church that I know of. So I want to know we need each other, because we need to bounce each other's off. Like, I need you to tell me, am I wimping out on this? Or do I really need to go there? Let me tell you about my congregation. What do you hear in what I'm describing? So what's my balance? We need each other because we are so blind to ourselves. Thank you for raising that, Ted. Yeah, please. I need you a mic, please.
And as a result of that, you'll believe your own mail, but also you'll end up, I guess, putting yourself on the Isle of Patmos again, because like you said, you'll just go back and forth, prepare, and then you don't communicate, nor do you associate, and then you just go back and do your thing, and then it's just a ritual.
Yeah, right.
Now, fortunately, that's not me.
Of course not. And never would have occurred to me.
Or anybody in here. I was just saying, hypothetically, I'm just saying, no one in here, but I'm just saying I've heard, you know.
Yeah. Yes. Rumor has it.
Yeah, but fortunately, I have an accountability group and some other brothers that I'm close to. So
great.
Personally, that's not my case.
That's great. All right, turning the page 22 to ways to offer the message. I'm not going to go through these in great detail. I'm going to trust that your training in homiletics is going to make this sound pretty familiar. Oops. Okay, so different ways that we can offer the message. So as I said before, we can tell stories. So if we want to use one of our own stories, it doesn't have to be telling it in the first person. We can make it second person or third person. We can make it semi or autobiographical. The way that I think, that it maintains the integrity, that it's still a true story, is that it is containing the kernel of truth. It's like parables didn't actually happen. Are they true? Yes, right? So when we find what the essence is, essentially what we're doing is we're writing a parable about the message that we are trying to communicate. So as long as that essence is true, then I think we have ample evidence in Scripture to be able to write our own parables. We can also write a whole story sermons where the entire sermon is a story, which happens to be one of my favorite things to do. I have to be careful not to do it too often because I love writing whole sermon stories. And then we can, of course, fictionalize a true story to protect anonymity, especially if it is a story we have witnessed. And of course, whenever, ethically get people's permission, even if it's being fictionalized, if it's somebody who might be around or whatever, get their permission whenever possible. So if listeners are likely to share feelings of incongruence, name it. And that goes back to sometimes you can only preach on so much. And so it's okay to start off by saying, I'm preaching on this. I know the text also says this. Tune back in 3 years, or we'll talk about it in Christian Ed, or but to name the elephant in the room so it's not distracting can be one way to do that. But also allowing leaders, sort of going back to what Ted was saying about letting listeners feel the tension. So don't give them an easy out. Leave them with feelings of incongruence. What we know neurologically is that human beings cannot stand to leave a question unanswered. Now, this is where we get misinformation and assumptions and all sorts of things, because we will fill in the blank automatically because we can't stand that tension. So we'll fill it in with any answer. It doesn't have to be a true or correct answer. It just has to be an answer. But this is where leaving sermons with questions is so powerful, because people will be compelled. They've got to answer it somehow. So they will be wrestling with it. So tension is a way of creating questions. So not giving people an easy way out, let them feel it and wrestle with it themselves. If incongruence can't be resolved or it feels too tender or vulnerable for the preacher, preach about something else. Again, do no harm to the preacher. So you don't have to preach on, like it's very common in my tradition for people to preach on the gospel. We don't have to. And a great time to pull out one of the Psalms instead. So there's not a compulsion to preach on something that is going to be too difficult for the preacher. If not mentioning the incongruence would be distracting, but you still plan to preach on something else, I said that sort of name the elephant as this preamble, or of course you can do it in the prayers. Christian Ed newsletter is another way to do that. So there are multiple ways you can still name what isn't being talked about. You can preach a teaching sermon to better understand the incongruities of the text, again, without necessarily resolving the tension. So just raise it up and say, the text says this. Most of us have the experience of that. How are we going to put this together? So let's dig into the text to understand better what it says. So a teaching sermon can be a great way to deal with a difficult sermon. You can use show images or an object, or use music to evoke an experience of congruity or incongruity. So it doesn't have to be only the spoken word. There are lots of different ways that we can bring in feelings that we want people to experience in a sermon. So in the show, don't tell vein of things is you can hold an object in your hand to create curiosity. And what do we do with it? You can show a picture that gets at what you want people to think or feel. And of course, music also. So have the organist play a minor or a major chord improvising in the background to evoke a feeling. And then pastorally choose the occasion to name incongruities. Like I said, Christmas Eve is probably not the time to talk about the virgin birth. Great. Okay, so we are now at questions. Oh, you've got some pages for more questions for reflections. But we are here, so questions about ways to preach, questions about any part of the process we've talked about today, congruence or incongruence that you have experienced in this workshop. So what are your questions? And it can be about sort of preaching in general, like I've always wanted to ask about X. So what are your questions? Or have we come to the sleepy time of the day that it's like, I don't know if I can muster any up?
I get a lot of comments about the stole I'm wearing, my haircut, my hair color, my shoes, my robe. I guess the best thing is to say thank you and move on.
Yeah.
Question mark.
Yeah. Yeah. And there's also, if it's, I think one of the difficult things for us as pastors, maybe more so for most women, is that we try to be nice and polite. That we think pastoral means that we got to be nice all the time. And I think sometimes the most pastoral thing to say can be, depending on circumstances and a host of things, is I'm really glad that you like my hair, but in the future, don't worry about it. I don't need to hear. Yeah. Is to start finding ways to say, that's not okay. Gentle but firm, and likely that if people test those boundaries, we got to say it again and again and again because they're going to push back on it. But be able to figure out ways to say, yep, that's what it is. Next time, I don't need your feedback. Yeah, I don't need your feedback. Yeah, but it takes guts and courage, and people won't like it. But that is part of respecting the dignity of our human being. Yeah, of saying, that's too far. That's too far. Yeah.
What is the difference between preaching a sermon and giving a Toastmaster speech?
Well, I will first say I've never actually heard a genuine Toastmaster speech, but speeches in general. I would say it has to do with what is the preacher's sense of the stake in it and what you actually believe. And sermons, by their very nature, are always persuasive. I'm trying to persuade you this is really good news. And I'm going to tell you why I think it's good news. What you do with it is up to you afterwards. But I am trying to persuade you this is great. Whereas a speech can talk around, it can talk about, it can be information giving. It isn't necessarily persuasive. And it doesn't necessarily have a subtext around it saying, I really want this to change your life because I think this matters. I really want this to change the world because I think it can. So does that help? Yes, thank you. Yeah. Good.
I also think one of the gifts of preaching, and you've spoken to this in what you're teaching, is the ongoing relationship that we have with congregations.
Yeah.
You know, if you watch a TED Talk, that person gets one shot, right? And
Yeah.
yeah, they work on it really hard and they do a good job, but we get an ongoing conversation. And so we can choose when's the best time to have that part of the conversation. And so it allows us more opportunities to dig into all of this.
Yeah, right. Yeah, I'm glad you raised that because the relationship aspect, the ongoing unfolding, it takes time, we're moving in millimeters. Yeah, that's absolutely critical.
I'd like to follow that up with another statement about the relationship that a pastor has with a congregation. I know when I first started out, I only took baby preaching. I did not take senior preaching. And I had not intended to become a preaching pastor. I intended to be a chaplain. So those first years were really difficult for me. I came down to 3 questions that I tried to ask myself before every time I started a sermon. And the first was, what does the text say? And then the second was, what will I say based on what the text says?
Mm-hmm.
And the third was, how will I say it so that the people can hear and will listen?
Yeah, great. Love those questions. Thank you for offering those. Those are terrific. Good. Let's see, we've got some from Zoom. What do you prefer, congruence versus incongruence? Depends on the text, the week, what's happening in my life, but I would say sort of in general, I like incongruence because I learn more. It's the wrestling, that's where the meat happens. I may not enjoy the process, but I usually like what I learn on the other side. Tips for promoting naivete and lexia when everything else is jumping in. So I assume by everything else, it's thoughts, questions, to-do lists, and so on. Be quiet before you start. Pray. Remember the intention behind it. Why am I doing this? What am I hoping to gain? And especially I want to come to God as a little child and sit at Jesus' knee and say, what do you got for me today? And that sense of, I'm soaking this in for the first time, and it's a practice because this is hard for nearly everybody. And so keep iterating it, and it'll get easier. When do I start a sermon for the following Sunday? Okay, so this is what we do at Backstory Preaching. So I recommend doing a sermon prep over several days. And there are a couple of reasons for that. One is what we know from the neuroscience of creativity is that creativity is happening in the blank spaces. It's when we are not working on the thing that stuff happens. That's why you go to sleep at night and you wake up in the morning and, oh, there's the thing. Okay, that happens to all of us. That is part of our neural wiring. So that's why taking walks, taking showers, so that there is time. So when we put time in between the aspects of prep, it's actually, we get more out of it. Things will go faster because we give more creative time, more space. And that makes it more efficient because then we're not working so hard because that's when stuff just gets handed to us. I mean, we don't have to do anything. It just gets given to us. So I recommend spacing it out and also giving enough time for revisions at the end. So there are pros and cons to everything, and everybody's schedule is different, and there are seasons of life when it changes. But the more we can offer that space, the less stress it brings. And one of the things we do all the time at Backstory Preaching is finishing sermons by Friday. So that literally Backstory Preaching has saved marriages. That is not hyperbole. I'm not kidding. We have saved marriages because the stress in the household was so high because of always doing sermon prep on Fridays and Saturdays. And I want to, just to put this in perspective, if you are doing your sermon prep on your Sabbath days, your personal time, because there's no other time to do it, you are preaching as a volunteer. I want you to hold that in perspective. That is, you are volunteering to preach. And if that is okay with you, and it is okay with your household, then Godspeed and keep doing it. If it's working, don't fix it. But if that is not working, you are the only one who can change it. Nobody is going to rescue us. Nobody's going to come and pat us on the back and say, gee, this is too bad and you're working too hard. No, they're not going to do that. We are the only ones. We control our systems. So we're the only ones who can change it. But that takes time. It takes time to get us into that mess. It takes time to get us out of it. So we offer ways to do that and support to help you get out of that so that your sermons are, most of the time, there are always exceptions, but most of the time they are done when you want them done, depending on your schedule.
Yeah, I had a sage, seasoned pastor from years gone by that always poured into me and some other men, and he always instructed us, like you were saying, essentially come Monday and then be done by Friday. And he used the term always have a skeleton, and eventually by the time you get to Friday, you'll hopefully have some meat on it. But in reality, as everyone in here can probably attest to, that's in an ideal world. Sometimes you might have 4 funerals in 1 week. Sometimes you might have to go visit 4 people in the hospital in 1 week. Sometimes you might get a call at 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning and then have to tend to that and then turn around and go to a funeral or go do something else related to ministry, and then boom, Friday's there. And you're like, wait a minute, what happened to Tuesday and Wednesday and now, and then that's why, fortunately, because like you mentioned, your routine and because of study and preparation and because of stuff that you didn't thought was naive during the week, that God was depositing that into you, and then come Friday, you look down and, oh, that's my sermon. You didn't literally prepare for it, but
right, it arrives to you. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
You got to be paying attention.
Right. And it's also why I really recommend starting, at least reading the texts for the next week, praying Lectio on Sunday or Monday, at least a week, so that when we have an expression, we say getting lifed. You got lifed. So that when you get lifed, which will happen, you've at least got those texts rolling around in you, and you are carrying them with you through the week. And that is just in and of itself is a huge advantage. Tips for teaching or supporting laypersons to use these techniques. There is no difference. Just use them as is, because it works regardless. So this stuff works regardless of the form of communication. It works for every form of communication. It works for every form of ministry. So use it as is, and of course adapt them all to your own personalities and what works for you. Have you seen backstory preaching affect the spirituality of congregations and audiences? I am told by people in our program that it does. So I'm not out actually witnessing that myself, but I am told that it does. I mean, what I hear is that listeners pick up on the difference in the preacher immediately. When they start feeling closer to God, and that affect is coming through. And then the other thing is we teach right away how to preach one clear message of good news. One clear message of good news. And so when preachers start preaching with just one message that people can follow through, those are the 2 things that people pick up on instantly. And those are things that we help with fairly quickly. All right, my time is up. So, unfortunately, life be lifing. I love that. Unfortunately, life be lifing. That's great. So if you want to learn more about backstory preaching, of course, go to the website. We do all sorts of things from, if you want to go deeper into some of what we talked about this time, you can join our ongoing membership. We also run a sermon camp every August, September that goes deeper into this. If you want to do a really deep dive, we have our mentorship, and which applications are going to come up in May, and which is where Backstory Preaching began, is with our year-long mentorship, and since 2016. And two things I will say at the moment about it. One is that of all the exit surveys we've ever received, we are still batting 1,000. 100% of participants recommend this program to their colleagues. 100%. And the other is we have so much data about the efficacy of this program that we guarantee it. You go through this program, you get to the end of it, and if you have done all the things, and you get to the end of it and say, this was not worth my time or money, we will refund you 100%. And nobody has ever taken us up on it. So go to the website and you can learn all the things. And of course, reach out to me anytime, lisa@backstorypreaching.com. And thank you.
So I just want to say, those of you that are online, we have a QR code that you should be able to see, and we'll keep that on for a while so that you don't run off until you complete this survey. We are offering a book, Lisa Cressman's Backstory Preaching, to those of you that fill out your survey. So even if you're online, if you want to get us your address, we will mail you a copy of Lisa Cressman's book, Backstory Preaching. And for those of you in the room, you can either hand back the paper copy that we've given to you or use this QR code to fill out a survey. And again, just show us on your phone that you filled it out, and we will give you your book. So just want to thank you again for being here on a Saturday when you all had other things that you could be doing. And if you want to mark your calendar, we have another workshop that's scheduled for the end of August, the Saturday of Labor Day weekend. So if you have some free time and want to join us, the Reverend Dr. Alice McKenzie, who teaches at Perkins School of Theology, will be joining us about storytelling. And so if you're interested in learning more about preaching and storytelling, she's literally written the book on this. And so we're really excited to have her. And there will also be an opportunity to receive that book in the mail if you pre-register. So look for emails on how to register and how to get that book in the mail so that you can be prepared for her workshop with us at the end of August, Labor Day weekend. And that's all that we have for you. I just want to ask you to thank Lisa with me. This has been such a treat. Thank you so much. Thank you so much. Yeah, literally, she's helped thousands and thousands of preachers all over the world with her program, Backstory Preaching. And you have the information there on your packet about how to contact her. So again, look forward to continuing to see where this ministry goes. So thank you so much. Thank you again. We'll see you around.